Professional athletes are some of the greatest athletes we've ever seen. The day in and day out that they have to show and to work out to prepare themselves to be the pro athletes that they are is astounding. Us normal athletes, coaches understand it, but sometimes can't fathom the type of athleticism that it does take to play professional sports. A lot of the professional sports have athletes that were multi sport athletes. They played multiple sports while growing up and in high school. Specialization has become a bigger, prominent thing that's been happening, but most of the athletes have played multiple sports. Their God given abilities have taken over to certain sports, which then causes them to be much better in another sport. That is how they become professional athletes in said sport. If you were an NBA basketball player, you probably did track, you probably maybe did football, you did something else, cross country, whatever it was. But your God given abilities showed that your talents worked better for basketball, able to go to college for your sport, and were able to get a scholarship, play professionally, and get you to the point that you are today. Same thing with NFL players. A lot of stories about NFL players, how they were able to play basketball for a while, and then their talents, their God-given abilities translate to the professional game. And that's what happens with a lot of athletes. When they get to the pros, those God-given abilities overtake because the pro system, more is required of you. You have to keep up. You have to be able to perform and do certain things. Just because you're an athlete doesn't mean you're always going to fit in another sport. While you're in high school, it's good to try them. You're an athlete. You're the best athlete in the school. It helps your body more during those times to play other sports and show what a true athlete you are. When we're talking about college recruiting involves coaches that want them to be multi-sport athletes. They want to see them compete in something else, be put in different pressure situations, and able to perform there before they decide that they want to give that player a scholarship to play college in the sport that they are recruiting them for. This does not mean you can just be dropped off and played in other sports and be the best that there can be. Some players that play NFL, they were good basketball players in high school. Maybe they got some looks in college, but their God-given abilities overtook and went to football, vice versa with basketball and football. Maybe it was with baseball. Maybe it was with soccer. This does not translate to you to be able to be a pro in any sport. I think sometimes people confuse being a super athlete and being able to do the things that are asked of that pro athlete day in and day out, what it takes, and the differences in between the sports. If you compare the NFL and NBA, they are both contact sports, but football is on a different level of a contact sport. It is a collision sport. The window room of being an NFL player to make mistakes is very low. Football plays, they average about 6 seconds. Then you get an average of 25 seconds to 40 seconds possibly in between plays. NBA is a contact sport, but it is not a collision sport. There is a difference. NBA players run miles if they play a certain amount of minutes. They run miles during the course of their game. The hand-eye coordination to make a move one-on-one is very impressive and something that they have to be able to develop and do. Even though some of the sports go hand in hand, eye coordination, you are making that one-on-one move. If you're a wide receiver, if you're an offensive lineman going against the defensive lineman is trying to make a one-on-one move on you. There are ways around that when it comes to technique. There are ways around that when it comes to scheming. There's double teaming. There's cut blocking. There's don't block them at all. If you have a good running back, does the wide receiver have to do as much work? There's so many there's so many different differences in each sport. That does not mean just because they're successful in one of those sports that you can pick one of them up and drop them off in the other sport and they could be successful. I think NFL players are way more tougher than your NBA players. I know the NFL is turning into quote unquote flag football. They're taking away certain tackles. They took away the hip drop tackle. They're protecting the quarterbacks more, certain hits in the open space. Some of it is for the good of the game to be safer, to prolong careers, but they're also protecting the money. Whoever's getting paid the most, that's who they're going to protect, and that's why it's usually quarterbacks. The NBA has gotten softer over time since the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s to mid 2000s, and it's slowly dropped off. They tried to bring it back this year, especially right before the playoffs after the All-Star break, and players and fans were complaining because they saw more injuries. Well, they saw more injuries because they were not used to playing this physical style of play. NFL players are used to that because every single play for most positions, there is hitting and pushing and blocking involved, getting a guy off of you and everything else. And there is no foul to hit your arm unless it's a pass interference. But while you're trying to get open, they're just hitting you, smacking you. It's not a foul. We have to think that just because they're super athletes does not mean they can go to the other sport and dominate, especially when they get to the pro level. High school level is perfectly fine to play around with different sports. College, some do both. Another perfect style. But once you get to the pros where they're the best of the best, your athleticism sometimes can help you, but it also is not the end all be all to look at, can you play another pro sport? A while back, Austin Rivers, the son of Doc Rivers, made a comment on Pat McAfee's show. He said that he could take 30 NBA players and seamlessly just drop them off in the NFL and they would dominate and be able to fit in. He said, then he also said you cannot take 30 NFL players, drop them into the NBA, and have them play to a high level. There's a lot to unpack with a comment like that. The first thing I would say is if they are in a pro sport, NFL, NBA, even if they're not a starter, they have some God-given ability, talent, and for most hard work ethic that we don't have, that we were not born with. So they're all great athletes. But I don't think that you can make a generalization quote like that for a few different reasons. Does Austin Rivers understand that, Julius Peppers of the world, Gateses of the world, some of them played basketball and then played football. Some guys in the NBA played football but chose to take the college basketball route and able to do that. So there are some that can do both. But I think both things where I don't think you could take NFL players and drop them into the NBA and then right now today be a high caliber top tier NBA player. I also don't think you could take NBA players and drop them into the NFL and they could be a top tier player. I think it goes both sides of this. Austin Rivers continued on the Pat McAfee show, and then JJ Watt had rebutted back. Kind of went after Austin Rivers and said, you don't have a job in either right now. Go ahead and try it, trying to get him to say you go to the NFL. Then JJ Watt also responded with, for the record, I could absolutely not play in the NBA. 6 hard fouls is all I could give you and call it a day. So they kind of went back and forth. Austin Rivers said, you don't think Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards, can make a transition to the NFL as a wide receiver? What about prime LeBron James? What about big old Zion Williamson? Prime Derrick Rose or prime Russell Westbrook? Aaron Gordon at tight end? Then he said, now give me your NFL to the NBA and I'll wait. Notice I never said myself, by the way, so easy on that towards me. JJ Watt came back and apologized about how he should not have responded to that. But he had gone on the Pat McAfee show and explained how both hand in hand, because I want people to understand this. It's easy to sit there and say LeBron James is an athlete, super athletic. Nobody's ever denied that. I've never denied it, and I'm not a LeBron fan. But you're telling me that you could drop him on the Dallas Cowboys, and people think it's easy just to throw him the ball. Just throw it up, right? When you're going against a corner safety that's going to be very physical with him, and we've seen the physicality of the NBA drop, so he's not going to be used to that and able to go up and combat the pass. Or you're going to send him on a post or in the middle, and he's going to get laid out. He's going to get laid out, even if there's a flag. Sometimes teams will do that to set the tone. You're telling me that he could do that. You're telling me some of these other NBA guys that he mentioned are going to go out and block a Freeney. They'll go out and block a Khalil Mack, Bosa. Like, just because you think about tight ends as going up and catching the football, which is a big part of the game, you're telling me they could go out there and block. You tell me they can go out there and play that physicality style for the entire game. I'm not saying they're conditioning if you just want to run. Each sport involves different conditioning. I said basketball players run a lot of miles. They need to work on their sprinting. Sprint work will help them run longer. Football also has to work on sprinting. But football is allowed to have different breaks because the average play only takes about 6 seconds. And they have, let's just say, 30 seconds in between plays. They have more time to rest. But there's a different training method when it comes to like the weight room. They have to move the weight quick because that play is 6 seconds. They have to be able to move quick and make decisions quickly on the fly. They have to be able to work together with other people. They have to be able to communicate. NBA and basketball, your training is different. You're working on more sprint work, different types of footwork, different types of techniques. The play is constantly moving, especially in NBA. You got 24 seconds. Turns around, you got to be able to play defense. You got to be able to box out and do these different movements, right? Taking some of these NBA players and just dropping them off in the NFL does not mean that they're going to do well. He's making it easy talking about offense, but we got to talk about defense. Are you telling me that you could drop one of these guys off and they're able to play as a corner safety and be able to read everything, make the adjustment, make the hit, be physical? If you want to talk about some of these guys, you think one of those guys that he mentioned could block JJ Watt in his prime? I don't think so. And I'm not saying these guys are not athletes. They're super athletic. I'm not saying if they played football and they decide to take that route, not saying that they couldn't do it. I'm not even saying if you took one of those guys and gave them 2 years of training that they couldn't go out and do it. But the context of the comments, he said that he could pick 30 NBA players right now and drop them off in the NFL and they would do well. Now he's waiting for a saying about NFL players being able to be dropped off and play in the NBA. I think if you wanted to go back and forth and he made those comments, I think there are probably some NFL guys that could go in there and shoot. We've seen Terrell Owens play basketball. I think it was Chad Ochocinco. You've seen him take some shots. Don't quote me on the Chad Ochocinco, but I believe Terrell Owens has. Look at Jay Cutler back in his prime. He talked about how he played basketball and could shoot. So because you're an athlete, you could do other things. But we're talking about like going out and playing flag football. We're talking about going up and playing a pickup game of basketball. We're not talking about dropping them off and playing in the NBA with the pros. We're not talking about, I don't want to talk about dropping them off and playing in the NFL. We could talk about them playing pickup games, charity games, and you'll see how crazy athletes these are, that they could go out there and shoot, rebound, layup, these passes, go out there and catch a football, be able to throw it, those type of things. But from the outside looking in, that's what they see. They see guys that maybe could go up and get a catch. Yeah, LeBron could probably go play a 7-on-7 game, like a flag football game, and do really well because it involves running, jumping, and catching. And he gets breaks. To go out there with full pads on, somebody jamming you off the line and pushing you around, who's just as strong, and that's their job. They're paid millions of dollars to say, I'm here to lock you down. Pac-Man Jones on LeBron James, you take Pac-Man Jones because that was his job. Just saying because LeBron can go up and jump, and this is not a LeBron bash, and he's just the first one to come to mind because he was one of the first people talked about saying you could put him on the Dallas Cowboys and he could be slot receiver, outside receiver, and do these things. Just because you're an athlete does not mean that you can go play at a very high level in another sport. I don't think NFL players could go play high level NBA. I don't think high level NBA players could do that. One of the only times we've seen it was primetime Deion Sanders play professional football and professional baseball. That's a rare thing to see. I also think that baseball is one of the easier sports. It takes like I'm not saying it's easy, but when you compare, to me, it's easier. And that's why I think kids sometimes generalize towards baseball because it's easier and because they pay a lot of money to play games because people don't like to practice. Baseball in high school, you're playing 3 to 4 games a week. You practice once or twice a week, playing a lot of games. Travel baseball, for 3 days, you're playing probably 3 games a day. Don't really practice during the week. So that's why they kind of gravitate towards it. So I think it's because of that. And I also think because it's the easier of all the sports. So the comments from Austin Rivers, I think, are way crazy. I don't think that there's any truth and value to that statement. I think JJ Watt was on point saying, well, then why don't you go do it? You're not playing in the NBA right now. Why don't you go do it? And then JJ defended and said that I'm not saying I could play the NFL or the NBA, but you're saying these comments. So it was going to become this battle. But I don't think that you could sit there and say that this could work. Just because you're an athlete does not mean you can play other sports at the highest level in the pro game. Those are just my thoughts from those comments. I know they were from a while ago, but those are my thoughts on what that comment is. And people are still continuing to talk about it. So thought we would address it here. So make sure that you guys are liking, subscribing to the YouTube channel. Follow Ray on Apple and iTunes and Spotify. Follow on X at Coach_Steve72 and the Coach Steve Show. Instagram, Coach Steve72, the Coach Steve Show on Instagram as well. TikTok, Coach Steve72 as well. Check out all the affiliates in the description below. Check out all the other videos. Leave a comment in the comment section down below as well. What are your thoughts on, do you think pro athletes can just be dropped off in another pro sport and be able to be successful? Try to leave fandom out of it. If you're a certain fan of a player, don't leave that out of it. Generalized thinking. What do you think that could happen there? So thank you guys for watching and or listening. This is Coach Steve. I appreciate anybody that has watched and liked and everything and left comments. It's fantastic. I will see you guys next time.
Thank you.